Hi everyone. My name is Anika, and I will be introducing our two speakers, and then if we'll have time for questions at the end as well, and I will help moderate that. But welcome to our talk on tobacco hands, the habits of mutuality. Our two speakers today are Marnie Powers-Torrey, who holds a MFA in photography from the University of Utah and a BA in English and philosophy from Boston College. Marnie is an associate librarian at the Marriott Library, where she serves as the director of the Book Arts program and Red Butte Press. She is the faculty mentor for book arts designations and teaches letterpress, bookmaking, artist books, and other courses for the book arts program and elsewhere. Marnie identifies primarily as a book artist, and her book work is held in collections nationally. Cynthia Marsh is a narrative artist. She uses large hand-carved wood letters to begin a conversation that takes form in books, broadsides, and printed environments. As founder and director of the Goldsmiths Press and Rare Type Collection at Austin Peay State University, she no longer invites people to Clarksville, she's in Maine, to express their opinions and tell stories with the vast collection of wood type. Since its inception in 1997, the Goldsmith Press has received 16 local, regional, and/or federal grants to support community and student-centered projects. And I'll turn it over to our two artists now.
Okay. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, you sound good.
Okay. This is Cynthia Marsh, and I'm going to begin. Tobacco Hands and the Habits of Mutuality is a collection of layered printed sculptures that tell the stories of tobacco growing families living in the Black Patch region of northern Tennessee and southern Kentucky. Since the early 1800s, several thousand acres of land at the base of the Cumberland Plateau, known as the Black Patch, has produced a coveted, dark-fired, sweet tobacco used primarily as snuff. The Tobacco Hands and the Habits of Mutuality weaves a complex tale that follows three paths of inquiry. Number one, the narratives from independent, multi-generational tobacco farmers and their families. Two, traditional Southern quilt patterns selected to represent the tobacco families profiled. And three, reasons why dark-fired tobacco grew to become the agro-industrial foundation that supported financial growth in Middle Tennessee at the turn of the 20th century. Tobacco Hands began in 2007 as an investigation into the quote-unquote smoking barns that appear throughout Clarksville in late summer and fill the air with the sweet smell of hickory. Natives of the area often overlook how unusual it is to see a smoking barn, particularly to newcomers. The original team of investigators for the project included printmaker Cynthia Marsh, myself, historian Dr. Manoa Uffelman, and photographer Monica Quartrocchio. The team set out to interview farmers and relatives of long-term dark-fired tobacco growing families. The tobacco families profiled were suggested by colleagues and friends. They are representative of a variety of ways that tobacco culture intersected with family life in the Black Patch. Truth be told, everyone in Clarksville has a family tobacco story. And I'm not kidding about that. after the South was in a state of turmoil following the Civil War, rich or poor, Black or white, educated or illiterate, the problems cut across every financial and social strata. The soil, the climate, the workforce, the railroads, the waterways that converged in Clarksville set the stage for a window of opportunity. Clarksville was one of the wealthiest cities in the United States at that time. The city still resides on a very strong foundation of tobacco money. The process of raising dark fire tobacco, and here you see a diagram of a tobacco plant. Dark fire
Cindy,
tobacco, yeah.
you're not sharing your screen.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
None of these have shown?
Oh, I thought you were doing an intro, so I would have interrupted you sooner. I apologize.
Oh, you haven't seen any of the slides?
No.
Okay, so good. Hang on, I got to figure out what to do. I don't know how to get
That's
out
okay.
of here.
If you, so in Zoom at the bottom, for me, it comes up with green, share screen. So if you can see all of our little windows, like in the middle at the bottom. You can just flip through the slides too. I thought it was a good intro too.
Okay, okay. At the
I was
bottom.
enjoying the narrative.
Okay. Do you see that?
Yes, we see that. So I think you should just go to slideshow and play from beginning, and then
I'm not going to say all that stuff again.
you don't have to say all this stuff again, but we can see the images.
Oh man, I was doing so well. Well, such is life. Okay.
So under that, yeah, great.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Let's go back through this. Can you see this? Yes. This is a map of Tennessee. This is tobacco growing country, tobacco farmer, tobacco quilt. This is the State House in Clarksville, Tennessee. And these are the smoking barns that I talked about. When I first moved to Tennessee, I was like, what on earth is this? Tobacco families, rich, poor, waterways, Cumberland River Waterway, and the tobacco plant. Okay, dark-fired tobacco is a 13-month crop. That means seasons of cultivation overlap. There is no rest for the tobacco farmer. In the months of January and February, a small seed bed is cleared and planted. The seeds are covered with a cotton canopy to keep away the frost. In March, the tobacco fields are plowed and made ready for planting. In April, the tobacco seeds are moved from the plant bed to the fields. Children and extra family members ride on the back of a tobacco setter with baskets of seedlings. One person pokes a hole in the dirt, another drops the seedling into the hole, and a third person builds a small mound around the base of the plant and refreshes it with some water. In May, the plants grow bigger and stronger, and the crop must be watered, sprayed for infestation and disease, and kept clear of weeds. In August, the tobacco plants are ablaze with yellow flowers. At this point, plants must be topped. All the flowers and extra stickers must be removed because any appendages suck the strength and nutrients from the plants. Also, these are topped plants. We have the dreaded tobacco worm. that must be picked off by hand, and this is another occupation that is often given to the children. By October, the plants have matured. They are cut at the base, turned upside down, and stabbed through the stalk of the plant with a tobacco stick. One stick can hold up to 6 quote unquote hands of tobacco. A hand usually includes 6 to 10 leaves of cut tobacco. The hands of tobacco are loaded onto a tobacco dolly that you see here, and they begin the curing process in the field. November and December, the plants are loaded into the barn. The rafters in a tobacco barn are placed to accommodate the length of the tobacco stake. Thousands of leaves, and you can kind of see them through the door here. Thousands of leaves hang from stakes in the rafter. Now it is time to begin the fire curing process. The slabs of hickory bark are laid along the barn floor. Damp sawdust blankets the wood. Usually 3 small smoldering fires are set across the barn floor, and they burn for several days. Somebody must be there or should be there to watch the fires to make sure the barns do not burn down. But every year, many barns do. Over the course of a month, there are 3 different burns that occur to get the tobacco leaves fully cured. January and February, the new plant bed has been set, and the tobacco farmers wait for the first foggy day of winter. The moisture in the air revitalizes the parched leaves. Every member of the family rushes to the barn to remove the tobacco hands, and the individual leaves are booked or circled into a giant container called a hogshead and taken to the auction house. Okay, so back to the project. Initial work on tobacco hands stopped after the interviews were completed and the original partners fell out of touch. Since 2007, the project has taken a circular path with many starts and stops. Several questions needed to be resolved before work could continue. What was the intention of the project? Education, aesthetics, education, aesthetics, or to honor our past? And what visual form could house and present the volume of information collected? By 2016, the intentions were established and production had begun in earnest. The task, however, still seemed overwhelming. And thankfully, in 2018, a print and bookmaking colleague, Marnie Powers-Torrey, offered to step in as collaborator. It was her knowledge and tenacity, along with the efforts of my fabulous studio assistant, Allison Hamilton, that pushed Tobacco Hands and the Habits of Mutuality to completion. Marnie and I were working on different sides of the country, editing and printing family stories with wood type onto paper made from tobacco leaves. In the summer of 2016, Marnie arrived in Tennessee with her piles and piles of printed paper and printed fabric. My head was spinning. I went to Walmart to buy a $70 sewing machine and some wine coolers so Marnie could sew the paper and fabric together. With my knowledge of glues, stiffeners, and 3-dimensional form, we put the first hand together and hung it in the studio to dry. Later in the evening, I went to get something in the studio. And when I turned on the light, chills went down my spine. There was a fully formed 10-foot, 6-leaf tobacco hand curing in my barn. The final form had revealed itself, and the rest was, like raising tobacco, just a shitload of messy work until we completed the project in 2021. And this is the very first leaf, which I don't know how amazing it looks here, but it is overwhelming when you come across it in the middle of the night, and it is absolutely a tobacco hand, how it looks. Okay, I'm going to talk to you about one of the people that I interviewed and that it was my job to recreate in her hand. This is Claudel Wooten. Excuse me. At the turn of the 20th century, small farms dotted the landscape. Subsistence farming was a familiar way of life in Middle Tennessee. The Boone Smith homestead, tucked away in the wooded hills of Erin, Tennessee, cultivated the amount of food necessary to feed their family of 18 children. Like most small farms in the area, Richard Boone also raised a 5-acre. Why are we not moving ahead? Stop share. You are screen sharing. Okay, moved ahead. Excuse me. The tobacco grown on the small farm was referred to as a cash crop. Money earned from the sale of tobacco paid for items, shoes, household goods, etc., that could not be produced on the family farm. When their crop of tobacco came into season, they removed the back seat of their Model T Ford and the fragile leaves and drove the books of leaves to market. The log cabin pattern was chosen to represent Claudel's early childhood because it was a simple and earnest way of life on the Boone Smith homestead. Here is Claudel's family story as it is told in 7 to 15 line wood type, locked and printed in the log cabin style. This was no easy task, let me tell you. The 3 tobacco leaves that make up Claudel Wooten's tobacco hand address the primary aspects of life on the homestead. Number 1, family relationships. Number 2, farm habitat and holdings. And number 3, the process of raising tobacco. So now I'm going to show you some of the leaves I printed using the setting it up in the log cabin manner and then eventually sewing them together onto a leaf. And this is the way the first of the 3 leaves came out. You know, I was very happy with the way it looked, and it was not until Marnie produced her leaf that I really understood how this leaf would look. Now we're going to move on. Oh, and these are the 3 quilts that hang below the leaf. And these are also done in the same way, so that first we have the family relationships, then we have the land and the holdings, and then we have the process of raising tobacco. So the next group that I formed leaves for were Howard and Patricia Wynne. Howard and Patricia Wynne represent a very different side of the dark-fired tobacco legacy. Howard's father was a highly respected foreman, crop inspector for the tobacco warehouses in Clarksville. As a child growing up in the region, he had no interest in the production and manufacturing of tobacco. Dr. Wynne returned to Clarksville to accept a position in the history department at Austin Peay State University. Now, the legacy of the tobacco industry took on new importance to Dr. Wynne as he began to research the social and political and financial impact of the dark-fired tobacco wars, which occurred from 1904 to 1909. The information covered on the outer leaves of the Wynne-Gupton hand comes from conversations plus research material recommended by Dr. Wynne. And these are some of the comps that I did to figure out how to get the correct ribbon and bows pattern to work with this highly sort of stark information. I know you must look at this and think what a sloppy quilt this is. But again, it's only my comp. Patricia Wynne, on the other hand, is descended from the Gupton family, wealthy tobacco farmers who migrated from Ashland City from Scotland via Virginia in the 1800s. Patricia was an only child. Her mother kept her from the smell and the dirt of the fields. As a young child, Patricia played fanciful games with her dolls and her dog, named Lassie, on a knoll overlooking the river. She was raised to be a hostess. Glorious Southern womanhood. Patricia was somewhat of a rebel, however. She wanted to be in control of her own destiny. In high school, she became infatuated with the work of Robert Penn Warren, a local writer. Throughout her adult years, Patricia Wynne has devoted her attentions to literary causes, including the preservation of Robert Penn Warren's original papers. Both Patricia and Howard Wynne came from a tobacco tradition, but their lifestyles could not be more different. Given the femininity and grace of Patricia's upbringing, the ribbons and bows quilt pattern seemed appropriate. Each of the lower leaves were sewn using fabrics that referenced distinct periods of Patricia's life: childhood, teenage years, and adulthood. Howard, on the other hand, focused on the history, the political, and the social impact of the 19th and 20th century tobacco culture in Clarksville. The three outer leaves representing Dr. Wynne are also arranged in the ribbon and bows pattern, but as you can see, well, maybe you can't see, they were printed on tobacco ephemera, antique tobacco tags, and warehouse receipts. One of the pleasures of gathering the oral histories from the dark-fired tobacco families was meeting this man, Vivan Lee Farrow. Manoa, Monica, and I showed up at Mr. Farrow's farm on a summer afternoon in 2007, and the rest was pure magic. He is a fifth-generation tobacco farmer. The Farrow family had their farm, their land, and all their worldly goods taken from them 2 times since 1870. And each time the family scrimped and saved, worked as sharecroppers and servants until they could buy new land, and begin again. Today, Vivan Farrow is a very skilled tobacco farmer. He has put all three of his children through college and grad school. His life and story is more than amazing. But now I'm going to turn you over to my final collaborator, Marnie Powers-Torrey, who developed Vivan's story into an amazing hand of narrative leaves and quilts. Okay. You got it, Marnie?
I've got it. Thank you, Cindy. Thanks everyone for being here today. And I also want to thank CBAA for the project grant we received in support of this project. I'm going to walk through our process. Cindy was our historian for sure. I definitely did my reading, but my investment was heavily in these narratives and need to collaborate with Cindy. Let's see, now I'm having trouble forwarding my slides. So in the center here, Mark Barnett is showing Cindy the pegs he plants in the late spring or early summer. And when he used to start from seed, as Cindy said, he'd start to prep the plant beds earlier, and then the seeds would be transferred in April or May. Here's Mark's tobacco barn. And the sticks that Cindy mentioned earlier. Dr. Wynn is here on the left. He was very passionate about sharing his knowledge with us and wrote a paper about the habits of mutuality between white and Black farmers and their families. And I really took Dr. Wynn's reference of habits of mutuality as a phrase that described practical relationships where neighbors who have needs and means that could serve one another's interests and needs are bartered and brokered out of necessity. And through this project, Cindy and I have developed habits of mutuality of our own, I believe, and our skills, experience, and perspectives complemented one another throughout the project. As process-based artists, our creative work responds to materials and techniques to tell these visual stories. And all the materials, the paper, the fabric, the colors, the quilt patterns, the method, and the typeface were chosen to reflect and represent each individual family. This is a very early sketch of Vivan's hand on the left, and then on the right is the cloth leaves for the Ellis Barnett's hand. From what I observed, and I wasn't able to meet Vivan until actually the opening, but I observed through the videotaped interview that Vivan is a straightforward and hardworking man. His voice and stories were authentic, full of practicality, and thus, were so incredibly moving. We wanted the piece to be as true to his voice as possible. So the materials also have a sensible and functional feel. They're produced through a laborious process. We made handmade paper from tobacco and cotton, both staples in the South, and we cooked several batches of tobacco fiber, and we're really immersed in that smell for some hot weeks of work. We also used denim in some of the paper, as all of the family spoke of coveralls that they wore in the fields, both boys and girls. We use walnut ink to darken the handmade paper, and also use the walnut ink to coat all the hands to unify them aesthetically. And the Farrow story is set in a utilitarian condensed typeface, so that as much of the family's story, he had so much to share. It was just phenomenal. We could fit as much of the story on these leaves as possible. And when I pulled phrases, I was careful not to edit any of his phrases, but just to pull out sections that would fit on the leaves. So much of the information that Vivan shared was about the work in the field with the tobacco plants and in the barn to cure them. And I think, as Cindy said, that the group of leaves really does feel like an oversized hand of tobacco. I took my printed pages to Clarksville, like Cindy said, and we decided to sew the individual sheets together to form these large 8-foot leaves. On the left here is the initial layout of the pages to shape the leaves. And then came the really hard part for me. Cindy wanted to treat the paper to make it look more like dark fire tobacco. And this was a challenge for me as I imagined what would happen to my carefully pulled and dried paper that I'd painted with walnut ink and dried down again, and then painstakingly printed line by line due to the limited nature of a font of wood type. But I'm so grateful that I had that relationship with Cindy, and I trusted in the collaboration. The result is we're really happy with. The paper wasn't sized, but it actually held up really well as we formed it against this scrunched up chicken wire. Planning Vivan's quilt leaves was pretty intense process. And when I took my printed fabric components to Clarksville, Cindy and I decided to abandon my initial design graphed out here on the left. So we chose a simpler version of the Flying Geese quilt, which would assist with readability and simplify the sewing. The historical accounts talk of the Flying Geese design being used as a wayfinding device, leading individuals toward the next station on the Underground Railroad and north toward the possibility of freedom, or perhaps toward available food and water. Barnett Ellis leaves presented new challenges, and I'm grateful to Cindy for providing me the license to print on fabric. I was kind of born and raised in the fine press realm, and have done a lot of work on my own that is more intuitive and collage-like. But Cindy has been such an innovator, and I really felt the freedom to do this. So while I still had limited access to the University of Utah's book art studio due to the constraints of the pandemic, I borrowed a font from the studio, and I developed a method where I could print on cloth without any damage to the type. I set the type directly for my transcripts of the interview videos, and I printed one line at a time. The length of the chosen phrases was limited by the length of the press bed. The book art studio had some scraps left over from cutting paper making felts from a large bolt, and I thought that the thick woolen felt might act like a pusher and a cushion combo, as would be used on an etching press. You can see in the top right that there is visual pressure on the type once the cylinder rolls over it, but it is far less than an etching press or Vandercook press would apply. I'd usually rub the fleshy part of my hand over the cloth before pulling back the print, just to ensure that there was even coverage. This is Mark's voice here as he shared with us that he wasn't planning on many more crops. He was going to retire, and his sons were not interested in taking on the farm. And he was really glad about this. I think he was glad that they had other opportunities, though I'm sure there was some sadness mixed in as well. Here is a time lapse of inking the type and pulling a print. The wood type is very heavily inked so that it fills in the textured surface of the fabric. And this meant that less pressure was needed to transfer the ink. The hanging prints took weeks to dry. So again, I see a parallel to the process of curing tobacco leaves. There's my messy studio. We chose a crazy quilt because it's traditionally built from available materials without a definitive pattern. And for the interview, we met with the Ellis Barnett aunts in Paula Barnett's quilting studio, where she gathers with neighbors for weekly quilting groups, and they call these so-and-so Wednesdays. In earlier times, women often gathered around a quilting table to help each other with hand stitching and gather socially. And we felt super fortunate to be able to visit in like a similar country gathering. The lineage of this practice is really important for this hand, and the storytellers in this family spoke of reuse of materials, such as flour sacks for everything from underwear to blouses. The quilt style was chosen to reflect the many voices of the story, items of clothing and linens that Cindy collected from Clarksville thrift stores and passed on to me, and I also used fabric remnants from Vivan's hand. These materials bring their own histories with them and aid in telling the stories. The variety of fabric reflects the speakers and this extended family's narrative, and each voice is represented by a color of ink to represent the spoken word. Esther, as the eldest, became a leading voice set in red type on brown leafy cloth. Tipper is represented by black ink on various printed fabrics, as she had a little bit to say about everything. Dimple's voice is Prussian blue on yellow cloth. She was also a very strong voice in the narrative. And then Bonnie's story is in white on the blue background floral. She's the youngest, and through the whole interview, she was teased about having it easy as compared to the other girls. When I returned to Clarksville, out came the chicken wire and methyl cellulose mixed with walnut ink to stiffen those leaves. We used thread to create a sort of smocking effect to hold the shape of the leaves. And accomplishing the labor of the project in geographically disparate areas was challenging, as Cindy said. And over the years, my 3 visits to Clarksville were industrious, but still seemed way too quick. Another interesting parallel between the work of tobacco farming and the labor of our efforts, I believe, is that just as a farmer's work changes with weather and the timeline is completely dependent on how the humidity of the air, et cetera, we as artists were responsive to the weather as well. And we worked both in and outside as the process and weather required. The work, I think, has continued to change with the humidity as it has been shown in different places, and it's as the weather and climate changes. Here are the finished leaves that we were preparing to hang. These are Claudel Wooten's story produced by Cindy, as you saw in her slides as well. Just another look here at the process. And on the left, Cindy is piecing together the Winds quilt. And then on the right are the quilts as they are formed in Cindy's studio. I really think that each hand serves the others and is connected to the others. They all speak to one another to present a collective narrative of time, place, and culture. The opening at the county library was such an amazing celebration. I never could have dreamed at how wonderful it was. The families were there, the extended families, their stories and the work, and we had sweet tea and potluck style pies. And it really was just truly thrilling to meet these people. Here's Vivan on the left, who had been interviewed by Cindy, as well as his daughters and a huge extended family. So them being there was just phenomenal. And I felt really honored that they took to the work so readily. After the installations of the pieces, Vivan was interested in keeping his hand, and he's hung it in his barn/museum of family heritage on his land. On the right is Tipper of the Barnett Ellis family, and she's reading these leaves here. And seeing this family again, the Barnett Ellis family, after 2 years felt a little bit like coming home. They were so generous in our visits with them and their tales, and the South is where I grew up. So it was really lovely to be able to kind of share narratives with them. Actually, they really wanted to know about us as well. And Cindy has known the family for a long time. I'm so appreciative of the individuals who share their stories, as I said, and with all the people that were involved in the project, and now with a larger community. And I thank Cindy for the opportunity to collaborate on what is probably the biggest books I'll ever make. So I'm going to turn it back over to Cindy now.
I just wanted to add something else that comes from Ellen Canervo, who is the head of the Montgomery County Arts and Heritage organization. This is what she had to say. I have always admired the way art helps us understand our historic heritage. Almost every piece of public art in our city commemorates some historic event. Tobacco Hands is no exception. Hailed as the dark-fired tobacco capital of the world, Clarksville owes its growth and emergence as a vital manufacturing city to the plant that came over the mountains from Virginia and North Carolina. Your interviews with tobacco growers help them to tell stories from their childhoods and their family heritage, as many come from 5, 6, and 7 generations of tobacco farmers. 2 art creations converged to make the tobacco talks. So Ellen put together a year-long celebration of sorts of tobacco and the tobacco's importance to the heritage of Clarksville. And so she has had 5 presentations beyond the tobacco leaves, including a play that was written by a Juilliard-trained writer and actor, a storyteller, a professor of English, and a professor and chair of the agriculture department, all talking about tobacco, and it will continue until the end of the year. So I think the idea that this project brought together so many other participants from the community is really fabulous. And I just want to thank Marnie one more time. She has thanked me a lot, but really it is her vision for that first leaf that really saved my butt. I'll tell you, I had all this printed stuff and I just had no idea what to do with it. And it was her vision that brought it together. So thank you very much.
Thank you both. We do have some questions in the chat, which I think some of them have been answered also. So I think we answered the first 2 questions. We have a question, can we show this at Art Around Books soon?
Oh, that must be my friend in Vermont, Michelle. Absolutely. Oh, do you mean the leaves or the PowerPoint? Because the leaves have been dispersed. And I have a couple of leaves available, but not as a group. So that's that answer.
Cool. Send me the images.
Okay, good to see you.
You too. So good, both of you.
And then we also have, did you choose the fabrics?
Is that for Marnie, maybe?
I mean, I think it
That's me
applies-
again. I was very nosy. But you answered the questions. I put them in early and I was wondering, how did you choose those? And you did them, you went to the local thrift stores.
Right. I can't help it. I go to thrift stores every day and I have such a collection of oddball fabrics. It's just ridiculous. So yeah.
Next project.
I'm here.
Also, Cindy, Michelle was wondering about the colors on the printed leaf. So with Claudel's leaves, you kind of had it almost looked like pulp painting, but I don't think that's what it was. So she was curious about that process.
Yeah, I felt they were kind of drab, and the paper with just the walnut stain on it. So I spread all the paper on the floor and I would read the statement and just kind of splatter color depending on what was referred to in the statement, whether it was greenery or whether it was blue jean material. And I don't know, it was very freeing actually. And so I have many versions of each print, which is kind of cool. So Yeah, it was just paint that I had around. It was wall paint and acrylic paint, etc.
Are there any other questions? Feel free to either ask it yourself or put it in the chat.
I'll just pop in with saying, this was so fantastic. This is the best presentation I've seen in so long. I love this project. The materiality of it, the material is metaphor. There's every aspect from the first conception through the execution, and even that, like one of the participants ends up hanging it in his own barn museum. I mean, the whole way of this from conception to distribution, I love this. This is one of the best things ever.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Richard. That means so much. And
It
I'm
does.
sure we got to get that back to Vivan too, right?
You know, I think that the years and years that I spent doing community projects with the Goldsmith Press, I don't know how to say it, but it taught me a lot about intention. That if you go into a project thinking you're going to help somebody, that's not the way to go into it. You have to go into it as part of the community, as part of the project, as a participant. And if you don't, you're just looking at other people, and it doesn't come off in the right way.
I just wanted to say that I have a very fond memory of driving through the tobacco country with Cindy and seeing the barns and having her tell me the story. Cindy herself is a wonderful storyteller. And we take these road trips and she tells me a lot of things.
Thank you, Rebecca. You tell me a lot of things too.
I also really enjoyed just those moments when you all reflected on your collaboration and how the project evolved differently than it would have if you were working alone. And that's just a comment and an observation that, you know, I think it really shows how the sum of parts is greater than the parts alone. But I wonder if there's any other thoughts that you all have about just the nature of collaboration or how this particular collaboration worked out.
Well, I'm going to start by saying that when Marnie first called me, I was really excited because I was completely stumped and I had to finish this project. I was moving from Clarksville to Maine and I needed to feel this sense of completion. And it had been 10 years that I'd been working on this on and off. So when Marnie called, I was excited, but I was also scared because I thought, what if she doesn't think like I think? What if she doesn't do things like I do? And I'm going to have to say, Marnie, you know, that sucks or whatever. And I didn't want to do that. And I know that sounds arrogant, but as it turned out, it was the other way around. Marnie was the one that brought the vision of the form. And, you know, I have such respect for her. I mean, she says she's a straight ahead printer, but man, she understood. I don't know how she understood, but she did. And that was the most amazing moment to me. It just made the next few years rote. I just went through the process because I knew what the outcome was going to be.
Well, it's so funny to hear Cindy's side because from my perspective, this, you know, I'd never built something this big before. So I was, you know, when I went to Clarksville with all these sheets, I was just like, what are we going to do? You know, so I mean, I think our conversations together and re-looking at the material and referencing our source books, I think that is, you know, our thinking together really brought the project together. And, you know, I'm a big fan of collaborating. That's where my real interest lies. And when I saw Cindy at some CBAA conferences, I started to talk about, I wonder if she would ever want to collaborate with me, like, you know, and when she responded so positively and had this project on the table, you know, I felt like I did have some roots in the space and was really immediately invested. But I think what really helped the project move forward through all these years, I mean, there were some hard times. It was really laborious. And, you know, we had a lot of questions that, you know, like, how can we let these stories tell themselves? You know, how can we, you know, not get in the way of these narratives, but really just kind of, like Richard was saying, distribute them to an audience that can listen and see. But I think what was really key for Cindy and I is we both tend to be very intuitive with our processes and kind of make decisions on the fly. And I would say I'm a little bit more of a planner than Cindy is, and that may have been an asset. But I have worked with others who really want to plan the entire project out, and I can go that way too. But I think our ability to trust in each other's processes and our mutual respect is really what kept things moving through some really difficult decisions and some failures, you know, that really, I think the work ended up being stronger because of it.
Okay, I love you, Marnie. I guess that's it, unless there's any more questions. I just want to again thank, which Marnie already did. CBAA gave us a project grant, which paid for Marnie to come out for the last visit, and that was instrumental. Also, my university gave me release time for my last few years of teaching to get the project done. And also there was a grant at the beginning of the project for a faculty development and research. So all of those monies, which were not a great deal, but it was enough to keep us going. And Marnie's university also gave her travel money, I believe. No, well, release time or time to come anyway. Okay, well, they don't know what they're missing, right?
We have one more question in the chat. What are your collective or individual next projects?
You want to take that one, Marnie?
Well, I tend to be pretty responsive, as I said. So, you know, I look for opportunities to come along, and I really respond a lot to calls for work or running into people, like crossing paths with people and sharing ideas. So I just finished up a book project. Actually, I shouldn't say it's finished because the prototype's finished. The edition is not finished, but it was a book called in reference to Lucy Lepard's work and Warren Lair's work. It's You See, I Mean, and then it has some multiple titles, and it's a accordion structure that balances one tier on top of another. And it was made for a show in Wyoming called Seeking Balance that just went up last week. So then we're also active at the Red Butte Press, working on a new book called Oracle Bones. And so keeps us busy, but looking for whatever comes next. I do a lot of one-of-a-kind mail art collaborations as well. And that really keeps me rejuvenated.
Since I've moved to Maine, my ancestors all come from Maine. So I feel like I've returned home. And I've been doing a great deal of research about colonial times. And I think I have a book coming down the pike about that in about 10 years, if I'm still around. But I also gave all my book arts collections and papers to Bowdoin College, that has a wonderful special collection museum, the Hawthorne Library, and they have much of Audubon's work. And I am working collaboratively with my cousin, Sarah Haskell, on a book which will be a pop-up book about birds' nests, birds that are extinct now in Maine, and there are 11 of them. So that will be done with the Bowdoin College Special Collections. Anyway, so that's it.
Great, thanks. And Richard, it's gonna be on the CBAA website under resources. And then there's a link for the videos for the book art series talks. So that's where it'll be posted. And yeah, we have just been talking about this in the meeting of getting all these videos posted and making them a better resource for the future as well.
Thank you, Anika.
Yeah. of
You're a
course.
wonderful hostess.
Oh, thank you. That's so nice.
In a great Southern tradition, right? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Anika, for hosting us. And thank you. It's so lovely to see some familiar faces and some new faces. And thank you all for being here to hear these stories,
Thank
to
you,
see these
everyone.
stories.
Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you. So moving, so great. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.